Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our first webcast of 2018. Today I've prepared a tips and tricks session where I'm going to go through a few features that are perhaps a bit of the less obvious features of Capture. Hopefully I'll be able to show you something you haven't seen before, or I can help you streamline your workflow in some way. Before we do that, I'm going to take the opportunity to do a little bit of a recap of what's happened the past months, as we haven't had the opportunity to do this, because we've been running 3 webcasts with special guests in the studio. The first one, we had Mr. John Rogers here from the UK. And he spoke with us about a project in Scotland, a bridge to be more precise, the Queensferry crossing spanning the Forth of Firth outside Edinburgh. Following this, we had another webcast with guest where we were joined by Michael Carlson from Lumen Radio. And I spoke with Michael about many things, but all of them involving DMX. So we spoke about cable DMX, wireless DMX, Ethernet DMX. So if you want to know lots of details about DMX, that's a great video to watch. Furthermore, we had Sarah Clausen from ETC here on a webcast about color mixing. Sarah showed us the color picker of the ETC console. We had an ETC fixture here as well in the studio. And we were running this live with a capture visualization to show what the visualization looks like in comparison with reality. And we spoke about some of the challenges of color visualization and color programming as well. So if you'd like to watch these webcasts, they're all available to you on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube page. We have all our webcasts available for viewing on the YouTube page, so you can go back and watch all of them. There's also a number of tutorial videos and other helpful resources about Capture on the YouTube page, so if you haven't been there already, like it, subscribe, and follow us. But we've done some other things as well, apart from the webcasts. One of them was actually sending out a warning about one of the Mac OS versions, the most recent one called High Sierra. The reason is that we had received a number of error reports from users that there were graphics issues, crashes, and instabilities in High Sierra. It seems to happen only on certain hardwares, and we're not sure exactly which, so we issued a general warning to be cautious when upgrading. If you can, make sure that you can downgrade again to Sierra when you do this, in case you are near an important project. To make things worse though, there was a recent security threat that you may have heard of called Meltdown. Actually, there was more than one, but Meltdown was probably the most famous one, affecting all computers with Intel processors, almost all computers. And as far as we know, Mac OS has only been fixed with regard to Meltdown in High Sierra, so for security reasons, we strongly suggest that you do upgrade to High Sierra, but be careful. I also wrote an article on exposure in visualization and digital photography in general. So this is a blog post that you can read on our website. If you've used Capture to visualize color mixing fixtures and you wondered why sometimes the apertures appear white when in fact you're mixing a color, then this is the article you want to read. The final thing I want to mention is our new Showcase reward program that we launched quite recently. Well, in short, if you submit your showcase to us and we choose it for additional promotion, you get an upgrade to the next Capture product for free. So you can read about all the requirements to be eligible for this on our website, where we have a detailed page outlining the Showcase reward program. So hopefully you make use of this and we'll have some great imagery to show to you and our other users. So let's move on to the tips and tricks session today. I'm going to be accepting questions throughout the process. So if you have any questions to what I'm doing, or if there's something else you would like me to show, then just write it in the comment field of the video. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm also keeping an eye on what's going on there. Sorry. This is a bit new. So the first thing I want to show you is about the editing of objects in Capture. So I'm going to start a new project here and insert a box from the library. Go to its properties, where we have the dimensions of the box so that we can change the size of the box. Now this is done using real-world physical dimensions. In this case, the box starts out as 2 by 2 by 2 meters, but obviously we might want to add or write another dimension for the box. So the way we do that is by entering a number here, for instance, 4 meters. However, if I only enter a number without the following m, then Capture reads the settings of my computer and assumes a default. So in my case, it's going to use the metric system, and that defaults to meters. So if I type a 4, I get 4 meters. That means if I change the regional settings of my computer to the American standard, then typing a 4 would actually result in 4 feet. There is also the ability to override this in the options of Capture, which by default is set to use the computer settings, but you could switch this and override it with metric or imperial if you need for any reason. But apart from using the default settings in the system, you can also type in the units you want to use explicitly. That means I could type 4 apostrophe 4. Now for some reason that is actually not working. This is most embarrassing. Could it be because, yes, my keyboard setting is wrong? Right. So 4 apostrophe for 4 feet, or 4m for 4 meters. But I could also use other measurements such as decimeters. So 4 dm is 0.4 meters. I can also write 10 inches. You can also write several numbers next to each other to sum them together. So 1 meter 6 inches is perfectly fine to write. So that means that there's actually a sort of built-in calculator here. And there is, in fact, so if I don't write anything between the numbers, it assumes that I'm using plus. But it also accepts, for instance, the minus. And on top of that, it also does things like 4 times 3 decimeters plus 1 inch. So you have a built-in calculator here that's really useful when you want to do, well, calculations. You can, in fact, also use parentheses and division here, but I'm not going to do that for the sake of it. Now, this is a general concept that works in all the editing fields in Capture, so I could use it for the rotation degrees as well. I could type 1 plus 3 gives 4 degrees. So it's a general concept that works throughout Capture. So now I want to move on and talk a little bit about the camera views in Capture and the cameras. So I'm going to open another project file. This is the Chateau file that we made for the launch of Capture Nexum. So I would assume that you all know by now that the way to navigate the views is by using the 2 leftmost green buttons in the simulation views. The first one is a rotation and panoration tool, and the second one is for zooming. However, there are some other ways of doing this as well. And in order to show you this, I'm going to turn on a couple of options in Capture. Sorry. It's winter in Sweden, so I have a bit of a cold. There is an option called Live Updating Transformations. It's not one of the most common options you would use, so it's perfect for us tonight. If I enable this, what it means is that as I'm moving something in a view, the object will be moving instantly in the other views as well, rather than just updating the other views when I'm done moving it. And the reason I want to turn this on is that the cameras, the 3 cameras corresponding to the 3 views of Capture, are available to us as objects in the design. So, what on earth? Right. So here is the camera of the beta view. I think my mouse is giving me a hard time here. And here we can see, if you're looking closely in the gamma view now, down here, as I'm navigating the alpha view, we see the camera moving. So this is the camera of the alpha view. So I can grab that and move it in any of the other views. If I want to position the camera exactly, for instance, to simulate a very specific camera shot, I can do that this way. But another reason I'm doing this is to show you, let me just prepare a view here. So as I'm rotating the camera around the stage, you can see that it's rotating around a point at the center of the stage, and this point is exactly at the end of this camera cone we're seeing. And that is where our focus position of the camera is. So that is the point the camera is rotating around. So if I panorate the view, you can see the entire camera cone moving. And if I'm zooming the view, you can see the camera, moving towards the focus point or away from the focus point. Let me just, no. Right. So if you're working on your design and you're zooming in and out, then sometimes you can get the feeling that you can't get past a point. You're zooming in, and then you sort of get stuck. And the reason this happens is that you've zoomed the camera as close to the focus point as you can. I'm sorry, my wireless mouse is playing tricks on me here. So, in order to rotate around another point in the design, we have a concept in Capture that we call focus. And the way that works is, if I'm interested, let's say, in orbiting this actor on stage, there is a shortcut called Focus Selection that focuses this view on the selected object. So now that I rotate the view, it rotates around this object. So that is a great way of repositioning the camera so that you're, well, obviously focusing on something else during the design. There's also a shortcut to focus on all of the objects of the design if you simply want to, let's say, reset your camera. This is available as a keyboard shortcut as well, Ctrl F, which is very easy to have your left hand on. So let's see, is that the alpha view? Yes, brilliant. On top of this, there is an option for the zooming if you hold the Shift key on the keyboard. If you do that, then the camera moves towards the focus point, but the focus point isn't fixed. I've heard some users refer to this as a dolly movement. So essentially the camera is moved forwards or backwards without affecting the zoom angle of the camera. And another way of navigating the scene is by rotating the camera to a sideways position and panorating, which, as you can see in the other views now, effectively also positions the focus point. So if you want to rotate around a point further upstage, you would go to the side, center upstage, and then when you rotate, you're rotating upstage. So I've shown you a few different methods here. Some will suit you, some will not. This depends a lot on your taste, I think, what you prefer. I would also like to point out that if you have a mouse with a middle mouse button, you do not actually have to go down to the navigation buttons of the view to navigate. So wherever you are in the view, if you press the middle mouse button, it's the equivalent of using that first navigation button. Some of you might say, well, I only have 2 buttons on the mouse. However, almost all mouses have a scroll wheel as well. And if you hold and press the scroll wheel, this actually doubles as a middle mouse button. And if you're on a Mac laptop, then you can configure your trackpad so that you use 3-finger touch, well, or even 4 or 2-finger if you want, but I would recommend 3-finger, so that 3-finger touch also mimics the middle mouse button, which is actually very efficient. That's one of my favorites. Finally, I would also like to take the opportunity to show you this little beast. It's the 3D Connection Super Space Galaxy Navigator or something like that. They have a few different models, not all are as fancy as this one. We do support this device in Capture, so it has a 3D joystick that allows you to rotate and move the camera all in one. I tend mostly to get seasick, but some will say it's invaluable. So again, it's a matter of taste. But you can see how helpful it is to have the camera selected in the other views to understand the position and rotation that happens when I'm using the 3D mouse. All right, I think that covers my first section here. Now I'm confusing myself with all my wonderful devices here, which hasn't updated properly. There we go. So I think I have a couple of questions here. Let's start with the first one. When are we planning to release a new version of Capture, and can you tell us what to expect or what are the main things you are working on now? Thanks in advance and best regards from Andre. Well, I can't be specific about any dates here. Our general policy or plan is to have a release every year. So obviously we are working on a next version. Some of the things we are working on, well, we are focusing quite a bit on improving features that have gone unnoticed for quite some time. Some areas left dusty for too long, but I can't comment much more than this. Next question from John Rogers. Is it possible to rotationally clone an object that has been tilted forwards 45 degrees, like around a circular truss, tilted toward the audience? This may be past the ability of my brain in this press situation. So we do have, let's give it a quick attempt. I don't know if this is what you're asking for, John, but we'll try. So we have a function when it comes to cloning and rotation that relies on the position of the rotation anchor. So if I position this rotation anchor outside the box and I use the cloning tool. So let's say I want to clone a circle of boxes. I position the rotation anchor at the center of this circle. I obviously have to say how many clones I want and what the angle will be. So with a total of 8 boxes, we will need 360 degrees divided by 8. So here we have the built-in calculator again, working to our advantage, resulting in a circle of boxes. Now, this box obviously could have been tilted beforehand, like this. Now, what happens then, though, is that the circle as such is not tilted. So I get a circle of tilted boxes. I don't get a tilted circle of boxes, which I'm afraid probably is not possible at this point. So I hope that covers you there, John. And one more. Not sure if we are supposed to ask questions directly related to each section. That's perfectly fine. I'm looking for a best practice on creating booms and hanging the lights on them. Would also love to know then how you would eventually configure the booms in plot view to be readable as a plot. I think I will save that for slightly later. And try very hard not to forget it. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about selection and selection order. I'm going to do that with this project file again. So in Capture, as you're well aware, in order to select an object, you would simply click on it. This is fairly straightforward. If you want to select multiple objects, you can hold the Shift key and click on the additional objects. You can also drag the mouse around a number of objects to select them. That works fine as well. However, what may be less obvious is that when you make a drag selection like this, there is actually a defined order of selection of these objects. So if the rectangle I'm dragging is wider than tall, then the objects end up selected in order from left to right. That means if I attempt to patch these, let's take a blank universe. If I drag and drop and patch these in the universe, and my mouse doesn't give up on me in the process, sheesh, all right, anyway, then what happens is they are patched from left to right. However, if my selection is taller than wide, then the objects are selected from top to bottom. So if you are patching matrices, for instance, of fixtures, and you have, I don't know, 5 by 5 parkans or panels of some sort, and you want to patch them row-wise, then select each row individually. And if you want to patch them column-wise, well, then select each column and then patch them all together. So that is a very powerful patching trick. Capture also, of course, preserves the order of the objects that you've selected individually. So if you have a specific order you want to patch your fixtures in, you would select the fixtures using that pattern. And then, if my mouse is with me, let's just patch 3 of them. Then you can see it's left, right, center. And this works equally well if you're selecting the fixtures in the Fixture tab. So you can have a custom selection order here as well. And Capture remembers the selection order too. So I mentioned you can shift click to add objects to the selection. You can also use the Ctrl key. The difference with the Ctrl key is that it toggles whether an object is selected or not. So if I Ctrl click on the actor here, every time I click, he's either selected or deselected. But Ctrl click has one more function in Capture, in that it allows you to go in and select an individual object in a group or deselect an individual object in a group. So up here, I have grouped a couple of circle truss pieces with some fixtures on it. And if I want to select an individual fixture here, normally I would double click it, but I could also simply shift click on that fixture in the first place, and I would never have selected the rest of the truss. So this is very useful if you have a tendency to group objects. I know some users, they love grouping things. Some users, they don't think it's very useful. But it also applies to fixtures in the plot view. So here I have a DLX spot. And since it's patched and it has fixture information, we have this annotation below the fixture, which I can double click to select. And in paper mode, we have the ability to fine-tune the location of this. Now, as you noticed, I double clicked on it, which is similar to what I did with the circle truss with fixtures. That means that I could also have Ctrl clicked the annotation right away without selecting the fixture together with the annotation. Similarly, I could Ctrl click just the fixture. So if I have a number of fixtures in a row where I want to move the annotations, I could Ctrl click the annotations, 1 and 1. I could even hold Ctrl and drag a selection rectangle around the annotations, which selects the annotations only. Remember, if I simply dragged around the fixtures like this, I've also selected the fixtures, so if I move this, I move the fixtures along with the annotations. Whereas if I Ctrl drag around the annotations, I can move the annotations right away. And there is one more way of doing this, and that is using the select only function, where we have an option to select only the annotations of the currently selected fixtures. Now, this is more useful if you have a number of fixtures all over the place, and for whatever reason, maybe you want to rotate the annotations to the side. Then you would use select only annotations. Sorry about this. Select only annotations, and then I can use the rotation tool. Jeez. This is failing badly. Anyway, I hope you got the gist there. So let's see how we are on questions. Right. So we have a question from John. For fixed fixtures, is there a simple way to move them in 3D plane from one window rather than adjusting them in different views? Seem to remember something about focus on an object, but not sure. Well, let's reset the cameras here a little bit so that we are back in a reasonable state. Wireframe, right. So yes, you can move an object in 3D planes from a single view. Let's maximize a single view. The way it works is that when an object is selected in 3D, each of the faces, each of the sides of this virtual red cube surrounding the selection is grabbable. So if I click on the side, you can see it highlighting, and that's the clue to which plane I am moving the object in. So if I highlight the top plane, I'm moving in the XZ plane, and the front side is the XY plane, and the left side is the ZY plane. And actually, the look of this cube, you can see it's got the highlighted corners, is actually intended to mimic what it looks like in the top view when you only see the top plane. So you can look at this flat top view in a way as a 3D view seen from above, where the only plane you can select is that top plane that you would see in the 3D view. We have another question from Johannes Glöde. I look for a way to move a group of patch infos in the paper mode. If I have a lot of fixtures nearby, the patch infos are overlapping. I know the double-clicking thing. Is it possible to move a group? So you can't actually group the fixture annotations together as such. I think, though, what might work for you is if you've grouped the fixtures so that clicking on one of the fixtures selects the full group of fixtures, that you can use the select only annotations to your advantage. So it means it's a two-step thing. Group the fixtures and use select only annotations. There is a keyboard shortcut. Let's see. So Ctrl Shift A. This is not one I use frequently, but there's a keyboard shortcut for it as well. So I think you should be able to be very efficient with this if you want. Moving on, Milan Hodis. Hi, what kind of graphics card do you need for work with full render option? Well, I'm in between sections, so let's cover this one. You don't actually need a specific graphics card for anything you do in Capture. It's just that the faster your card is, the faster the renders will be. The higher rendering quality options you will be able to have in the visualization. Milan also mentions that with his 1080 Titan, he's got around 8 frames per second in a project with 60 fixtures. Well, the frame rate depends mainly on two things. One is the rendering settings you have in the project. The higher rendering settings, the lower the frame rate. And also what kind of fixtures you have in the project, and if you have complex things like transparency or very heavy imported objects. So it's very difficult to say why a specific project would be fast or slow. It would really have to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, this is also something that we are working on improving, on making sure to use the power of all different kinds of computers as well as possible. High performance on a 1080 card like Milan has is a very different thing from high performance on a cheaper laptop, for instance, because these two systems will suffer from very different bottlenecks. It's raining questions. How do I search many fixtures at the same time? From filter. I'm sorry, I don't quite follow that one. So Bernat Cornelas, if you could please elaborate a little bit on that one, that would be helpful. A question from Patrick Solly. Is it possible to give the patch address a different color than the power address? So I'm assuming you are referring to the fixture annotation we have here in the plot view. where I have a DMX patch as well as a house circuit, for instance. No, it's not possible to give different colors to these different shapes in the annotation, I'm afraid, but it's a very good idea, so I'm going to take a note of that later. Also, is it possible to rotate an object in 3D view? A question from Kurt Blumen. No, I'm afraid this is not possible. This is on our wish list for the future. Great questions. I'm going to cover one more bit here and get back to another question we had earlier. Because before we move on, I want to show how to focus a fixture. This may be obvious to many of you, but is in fact a rather common question we get. So I figured we'll go through that. So there are a couple of ways that you can focus a fixture in Capture, and it also depends on the type of fixture. When it comes to conventional fixtures, you can actually grab and move them in a plan view and see the result of that in the 3D view. And of course, as I showed before, you can also move the fixtures directly in the 3D view. That means if I rotate the fixture, this is actually a method for focusing it. But the main method, of course, is using the right mouse button to right-click on a position on stage to focus the fixture. And there my mouse kicked in again. So if you're on trackpad Mac, you may need to configure that right mouse button. Usually it's the two-finger touch. On some PC trackpads, the right mouse button is the lower right corner of the trackpad. And usually, and I think that includes my laptop, you could press the lower right corner, and while keeping it pressed, use another finger to move the mouse so that you're not limited to tapping on specific locations, but you can actually drag the mouse around until you find that specific location you want for the focus. Now, if the fixture is a moving head, it's a little different story. So here we have, I think it's the DLX again. When I right-click and I have a moving head selected, it is actually changing the pan and tilt of the fixture. I think if we look closely here, you can see the body of the fixture moving as I'm focusing it. So this is obviously a little bit different from physically rotating the entire fixture, which is something that you can still do using the rotation anchor in the view. I'm sorry about this. So actually what's happening is that as I'm holding the mouse button down and moving the mouse, Windows sometimes forgets the button is pressed and it releases it. And it's something that we've seen on a few different configurations with both wired and wireless mouses, but we have yet to find any reasonable explanation for. So it's not just that the batteries are low or something like that. Anyway, so right-click to focus the fixture. And if it's a moving light, we are panning or tilting the entire fixture. Now, the way this is done in Capture is by calculating virtual DMX values for how to make the fixture go where you're clicking it. That means if it's patched, and this fixture is not patched, excellent, so let's patch it somewhere. Jeez. Tragedy. So let's do it this way. Patch. I don't think I have anything on line 8. Let's home the fixture. Here we have it. Take the zoom down a bit to see it. So what's happening now that I'm focusing the fixture is that in the 8th universe here, you can see the DMX values capture is computing in order for the fixture to reach that point. So you can see the pan values changing up here as I'm focusing the fixture. So if you have the right type of DMX console connected, this information can actually be fed back into the console as part of a concept often called autofocus, because it allows you to quickly record focus positions in the console using your 3D environment. But another reason I wanted to show you this is another question we get sometimes, that you've started from scratch in design, you've added fixtures, you've programmed a look using the built-in control pane in Capture. You save the project file and reopen it. So let's, let's unpatch this fixture. It's unpatched now. Let's, my God, save and reopen. You can see the fixture isn't lit anymore. And the reason is Capture now has nowhere to store these virtual DMX values. So it's as if you've turned the fixture off and turned it back on again, so it resets to its default state. But if the fixture is patched, let's try and do this without using the mouse too much. So let's patch this on line 8 again. The DMX values we were using before are still actually present on line 8, so the fixture jumps right back where it was before. So the way to have Capture remember the state of your fixtures is to make sure they are patched. So that's a very good tip. All right, so let's see if we have, yes we do, some more questions. Quite a few of them. Wow. All right, Bernard is asking, I'm trying to search many fixtures at the same time in the fixture menu. I can just search one at the time. Fixture menu. I'm sorry, I'm still not quite following. So I'll move on. Graham Roberts. When creating plots and inserting header, view, etc., is it possible to snap to others? No, I'm afraid this is not possible. It's something we're hoping to fix soon. Michael Wilson is asking, how do I apply a texture to an object like a stage or a wall? All right, so this should be relatively easy to show. So generally speaking, the way it's done is I'm taking a box here and I'm transforming it into a wall for this specific case. So I'm making a 10 by 4 meter wall, like this. So the way you would apply a texture to the wall is by using a material. So the first thing you need to do is right-click on Materials in the Design tab to add a material for your texture. Then you would select a texture image file to use, which I'm afraid I don't have anything very good to use at the moment. I only have very high-res pictures here. So what you would do is you would choose an image for the material, and then you simply drag and drop the material onto the object. Maybe we have something. No, we don't, sorry. There is a full tutorial of materials on our YouTube channel, so I would recommend that you watch that because I go through it in quite some detail there. Let's grab one more question before we call it a day. It's from Patrick Solly. If I register a chain hoist, can I indicate what the trim height, the mark, and the weight are? And does he come along with a material export? So if we grab a Dmx Mover from the library, motion controllers, Dmx Mover, and turn the widgets off for a moment. You can see there are 3 axes indicated along with the Dmx Mover when we add it. And these axes are the X, Y, and Z range of the Dmx Mover. So if I have a mover that only moves objects up and down, what I could do is set the X range to 0 and the Z range to 0. And if it has a motion range of 5 meters, I would enter 5 meters here. Now in this case, the fatter dot indicates where it is at 0% and the thinner dot where it is at 100%. So by using the Y range and positioning the mover, I think you should be able to achieve what you're looking for, although I'm a little bit uncertain about your specific terminology here. However, the weight of the mover is not taken into account in any way. There is no, well actually there is a weight property, but you can't edit it, it's set to 0. So there's no way of getting the weight of that included in a report or such. So, although I can see there are more questions coming in here, I did have a question earlier on regarding plotting, where I'm actually also going to refer to the tutorials right now. We're doing another webcast, the 27th of March. Haven't actually quite decided what to do there yet, so it's quite possible that we'll do more of the same stuff we're doing here today to cover your additional questions, since there seems to be quite a few of them. So thank you for watching us today, and get back to us on the 27th of March. Let me just verify that, so I'm not fooling you. Yes, the 27th of March that will be. So thank you for watching tonight, and see you soon.